6 weeks, people. 6 weeks to college football. And actually, I'm cheating a little bit. That's week 0. So you Hawaii, UCLA, Nebraska, Illinois fans, yes, a little bit that you get to jump the gun on the rest of us. But for Oregon, yes, just 7 weeks away from college football and launching another run, we believe, at the Pac-12 championship, 2 consecutive in the books for Mario Cristobal and company. And, of course, a number of recruiting titles in the Pac-12 in a row and on their way to another one here in 2022. Talking Oregon football here live with all of you. Please leave your comments and your questions there in the live chat and debate topics for myself and, of course, Mike Black from fifthquarter.net. How's it going, Mike?
Going good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Chilling on a Sunday afternoon. Why not? Because life is good, and it's summertime.
It is. It's really hot outside. It's unbearable here in Florida.
Yeah, it's really muggy here, but I'm not going to compare it to Florida. I think it's pretty much summer in Connecticut. It's mid to high 80s and pretty high humidity, but not Florida standards. No.
Not like 100% humidity every day.
Probably more like 70. Yeah. All right, everybody, again, comments, questions, leave them in the live chat. We will pass them on to Mike, and I may have something to say as well as we review Oregon heading toward Pac-12 Media Days, which come up at the end of next week, I believe. Or is it? Yes, at the end of, yes, I believe around the 27th, I think is the big day. The SEC, the Big Ten, and the ACC go at it this week. We saw the Big 12 hit the podium last week. Recruiting is hot and heavy for Mario Cristobal and his staff. And Kevin Coleman's a guy that I've become familiar with because, of course, I host a number of these shows involving a number of teams. And Kevin Coleman's, depending on your service, either the best wide receiver in high school football or number 2. And Oregon's feeling good about where they stand.
Yeah, so over the past few weeks, it seems, at least from the guys I've talked to, that other teams have not cooled on him as a prospect, but cooled on Kevin Coleman in comparison to Evan Stewart. So a lot of the teams pushing for Kevin Coleman are also pushing for Evan Stewart. Like the top lists of the teams look very similar, and a lot of them lean more towards Evan Stewart. Kevin Coleman went from a long shot for Oregon to now at this point he's starting to seem like nearly a lock for Oregon. He seems really heavy lean towards Oregon at this point, and I honestly don't know what we're going to do with how many wide receivers we're taking in this class. We took like 4 or 5 last class. We're going to take another 4 or 5 this class. It's really a lot. But Kevin Coleman is not a guy you turn down. You don't turn down 5 stars, especially with the history of Oregon not landing 5. You don't turn down 5 stars.
Unless you can't do it. So they were obviously planning in other directions, and then Kevin Coleman has been a guy that they've been able to make some strides on. But yeah, you do not pass on this guy. He is at the top of his class at wide receiver. All right, Cyrus Moss is also a guy that's going to be in play and possibly make an announcement soon.
Cyrus Moss has been one of the biggest reasons I think that Kevin Coleman has started leaning more towards Oregon. Cyrus Moss and Kevin Coleman have tweeted back and forth multiple times about, maybe linking up and maybe playing together at some school. And although neither of them have officially named a school, they do have a lot of similar schools. Like if you go to what does 247 have, that college list, and it'll say like Warm or whatever it says. Both of them have Notre Dame. Both of them have Alabama. Both of them have Clemson. Both of them have Oregon. So it's very likely that they could end up playing together. But the main 2 schools that it seems most likely for them is going to be Alabama or Oregon. And Cyrus Moss has seemed like an Oregon lock for a few weeks, maybe even a couple months now. Cyrus Moss is said to be Kayvon Thibodeau's replacement, and I really, if I had a crystal ball, I would put it in for Cyrus Moss to Oregon. Kevin Coleman, not quite yet. Cyrus Moss, I'm almost positive is coming to Oregon.
Mike, you come on here and do some amazing work forecasting these recruiting targets. Why don't you have a crystal ball? Give Mike a crystal ball.
I've emailed 247 about trying to get one. They said no.
Okay.
I kept track for a whole year of my predictions and like everything, and I was at like an 86% accuracy for 1 year. But they said I need to keep track for like 3 years, so I've been doing that.
Oh, so they did give you some feedback to say,
Yeah.
keep track of this. And okay.
And I have to
All
like
right.
prove that I made those picks on that day. So I like take a picture of my computer screen, and yeah.
D-Rock Irish is calling us out, but more specifically, I'll take responsibility. Of course, it's my channel calling me out for us being late. So that's all. That's on me. That's on me. I got to get the link out
I had
earlier.
to pour a drink.
Then yeah, we had to pour drinks. We had to talk about drinks. We had to then discuss what we were going to talk about. So it was that big pre-production meeting that lasts a long time. So D-Rock, we appreciate you being here. Big Notre Dame fan joins us for all our live
here.
streams. Yes, D-Rock Irish and 904 Hurricane. Of course, he loves the Canes, loves Miami, and
I'm sorry.
he comes by and supports. Don't be sorry. They think they're going to do big things this year.
I mean, yeah, it's only so much you can do when your week 1 is against Alabama, though. Kills a lot of momentum.
It could do that. It doesn't affect the ACC, though. Then we've got Abrams 99 on the line. Mike, he says, do you feel like this 2022 recruiting cycle is more quantity over quality or vice versa? I feel like some of the guys in the 22 cycle won't have much of an impact. I don't know if he's talking about Oregon specifically or the overall classes down.
I'm going to take it as he's talking about Oregon specifically because maybe we don't have the average recruit ranking that we had last year. But if you don't think some of these guys are going to have an impact, that's just wrong. Like, especially the guys who haven't committed yet, even especially guys like Kelvin Banks who are committed, Dave Yulee who are committed. A lot of these guys, and we don't actually have a lot of space, so it can't be a quantity over quality class. We're at limited spots. We can't take a full class this year, so we're being a little more selective with who we're taking. I know we have a lot of I know we have a lot of guys at certain positions like receiver and tackle, but I mean, a Kelvin Banks is a 5-star tackle. Dave Yulee, a 4-star guard. Like, these guys are going to contribute, especially when you have guys going off to the NFL after 3 years. If you're producing like you want to, if we're producing like we want to, there are going to be guys going to the NFL in 3 years, maybe 2 years after a red shirt, or maybe they transfer in NFL. Whatever the case may be, we're going to have to continuously replace these guys. And don't forget, you have that red shirt year. So if you want to develop a guy, and in regards to your comment about like Michael Wooten was being pursued by almost every big school there is. Michael Wooten may be a 3-star, but Michael Wooten was being pursued by Texas. He was being pursued by Oregon. Obviously, he ended up at Oregon. He was being pursued by Texas A&M. He was being pursued by Arizona State. He was being pursued by a lot of teams to play tackle. And these guys aren't, just because their rating isn't as high, I wouldn't just assume that they're not going to have an impact. A lot of these guys didn't get tape from last year to boost their rankings to where they might actually be.
That's where there's got to be a disconnect there somewhere. When all you have to do is look at the offers coming in from other schools, and you got to feel comfortable. If you're Oregon and you see Arizona State, Texas, other schools of that caliber, you got to feel, regardless of what the recruiting rankings are, okay, those schools are seeing the same thing that we're seeing. He is 118th rated at offensive tackle. He's not on the national map in terms of a overall rating, and he's down to number 85th rated in the state of California. So yeah, the rankings don't look good, but
even the comments from Huffman said he expects him to get a 4th star real soon and take a massive jump in the rankings.
Okay. There it is. I think the rankings, because of the pandemic, mean a little bit less right now than they do in a typical year because they're updating a lot of it right now.
Typically, I know you said you might have got too hung up on stars. I don't think you really can get too hung up on stars. There was a statistic that I think I saw from Pick 6 previews that he pulled from somewhere else as well, that 53% of 5 stars are drafted, 20% of 4 stars are drafted, 6% of 3 stars, and 2% of 2 stars. There's a whole lot more of the 2, 3, and 4 stars, but 53% of 5 stars getting drafted oftentimes means they were really good in college. Anybody who gets drafted was really good in college. So these guys are going to produce if they're rated highly, but don't be too overly concerned if a guy isn't rated highly.
Yes, the scouting is not scientific. It's not a science, it's an art, but there is some science to it, and the recruiting rankings are extremely accurate. Are they perfect? Nowhere close to perfect. Accurate, yes. Yeah, you look at the percentages. Sometimes I'll see something where somebody's going to list the overall numbers and say there is this many 5 stars in the NFL and this many 4 stars. You can't do it like that. There are
The
only
numbers,
35
yeah.
or there are only 35 or 45 stars
Every
in
year.
every class. So
There's
there
like
can only be so
8,000
many.
2-stars.
The percentage of them, it's yes, you just
I
said
was a
53%.
2-star. Like everybody's a 2-star at least.
Look at that.
Everyone could get 2 stars.
What position did you play, Mike?
Defensive end and tight end.
Okay. In Florida.
Oregon, Florida, and Indiana.
You were all over the place.
Lived in 13 states, 16 cities.
Got somebody on the line here who's going to bring in a little class to the conversation here.
Ryan bringing in the class.
Ryan
What
Winter, Sports Chat 503. What's going on, man?
What are we doing, guys?
I like the North Carolina blue drip you got going on.
Oh man,
Oh,
I just
man,
got
it
back
is-
from the coast. Yeah, we just rolled into town.
It is strong there. That is solid. That is a good look.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go repping some Portland stuff, some Edgefield stuff, McMiniman Brothers, Portland Golf Club on the cap.
He just moved the North Carolina helmet.
I tried to match
Let's
it
do
there.
it.
You know, I don't like how there's never an Oregon helmet up there.
There is not an Oregon helmet. Do you know what this individual did? I just got that a few days ago because somebody wanted North Carolina represented. I said, if you give me a helmet, boom, the helmet was here. We got it done.
That's
So
awesome.
if Oregon fans want an Oregon helmet,
That's great.
you can send me one.
I have an Oregon helmet, but it's not one I'd like to, it's got Marcus Mariota's signature on it. I kind of like it.
There you go. How you guys been?
Good. We've been talking about recruiting, specifically Michael Wooten. Somebody said they were concerned that this class was more quantity over quality, but we were talking about how COVID kind of hurt the scouting and rankings.
The 2022 class?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Because they missed out their junior year. They didn't get that whole year of
course.
scouting. The junior year is the biggest year in scouting and recruiting.
For sure. Yeah, you knew there was going to be a drop off somewhere, but talent still shows up. They still got enough opportunity. Now, the offense and defensive linemen might be hurt more because I think the other guys still have a chance to go 7-on-7 and all that sort of stuff and still showcase some of their skills. But yeah, we'll see. I always like to say, man, I always like to get them out here, get them in uniform, see how they do. Freshman, the transformation from freshman year from senior year of high school to freshman year of college, pretty big jump. So
Did you see
We'll see how
Justin
they do.
Flo's pictures last year? Looking like
there's some dudes that maybe buck that
Shredder.
trend for sure, Mike. There's some dudes who might go against that grain a little bit, but it's still a major learning curve. I mean, even just going up against the scout team, I think for some guys is a major upgrade from what they
For
were
sure.
dealing with in high school.
especially guys like Ty Thompson who played really weak competition in high school. Ty Thompson's really good, but the kids he played, I hope they succeed in college football wherever they're playing at. That division is not very good.
Well, that's kind of my point. Is like you get these guys on the all-star teams. They got great highlight reels, but they're playing against subpar talent a lot of times. No offense to those guys. I was one of those guys who's subpar talent, right? I mean, you said you played football too. We were all one of those guys at some point who were subpar talent.
Yeah, I was the subpar talent though.
That's what I'm saying. Comparatively to the D1 athletes, they jumped over us in a hurry. So, I think it's important to kind of realize, that these guys are maybe not the same player that they were going to be in high school. Now, I have heard some great things about some of the guys who come in this year, the true freshmen for this year for the Ducks, that they might have some real good talent that might show up. We might be able to play this year. So,
like Troy Franklin.
Troy Franklin is probably the guy at the top of that list. So, yep.
Have a buddy who attended the Oregon practices. He said that's what a 5-star looks like.
Right. And I think that is a position that also might be a little bit easier to come in, step in day one, show your talent, show your skill set. Maybe that and
Think so?
cornerback or
With the veteran wide receivers we have on the roster, you think it's a little easier than say like a cornerback or
could be. Well, I don't think there's much expected of those young guys yet. So I think it'd be a great year for him to be able to pop off. I mean, there's been some years, when Micah Pittman first got here, they really needed him his freshman year, right?
Mhm.
They didn't have that many receivers. Now it's just overloaded. Now, I mean, I was talking with Bennett Williams the other day, and he was talking about how that wide receiver room is so deep. And I was like, yeah, I mean, with the transfer portal, some of those guys are gone. There's no way that you keep that deep of a team. And talk about this recruiting class, this 2022 recruiting class. There's tons of wide receivers on it. So somebody's got to go at some point. I mean, it's natural.
But at the same time, it clears space for, say, another Henry Toto or another Ika Vea is in the transfer portal. We can add guys at weak spots. So even if guys do transfer, don't worry too much about that. The staff is going to replace them with quality guys.
Well, and you talked about 2020. 2020 doesn't count against the team. So you have a bunch of these guys who are having an extra year eligibility. That even changes things even more. You have a guy sitting in the wings and he's third string, and now he's got to wait another year or two to get back on the field. It's even more of a reason to leave.
So I want to go over D-Rock's question real quick about the NIL. If you want to introduce us into that so you can
Yeah, so it's obviously been the topic of the offseason along with the 12-team college football playoff proposal, but in recent weeks it's been NIL, and I think it took College Football Nation a little bit by surprise and by storm that there were so many agreements already in tow before July 1st. So once July 1st hit, man, there were deals being signed and it was already in full force, and it's been pretty fascinating. There's some major news concerning Texas A&M and Michigan that just came out today. So as it pertains to Oregon, let me get your thoughts, both of you, and then also just in general, how you feel about NIL and maybe some of the pitfalls, the gains, the benefits, and just, Ryan, your overall thoughts about it.
Well, yeah, so that's interesting you said that, because I just had, like I said, mentioned, I just talked to Bennett Williams, and he has a unique kind of viewpoint on the transfer portal and name, image, likeness, I think. And, I tend to think that it's going to be a bigger deal locally for a lot of guys than it is going to be a national name brand sort of a thing. For Oregon, for example, I think there's probably only one real name brand player on the team, and that's KT. He signed a deal with Nike that's going to be a big deal, 6-figure deal or whatever for autographed pictures or just pictures of him or whatever the case may be that Tinker did. But I think the average guy is going to be impacted by it by, let's say it's a backup offensive lineman, a lineman who maybe gets to a pub for a sandwich shop and gets free sandwiches out of the deal. I mean, I think there's a lot of flexibility in the name, image, likeness. I really, really like the idea of kids being able to go back to their hometown during the summer and run a football camp. So all these kids come from a high school. These high schools all want to be a part of the promoting of their brand for their 7th and 8th graders that they're trying to recruit into their school. The summer camps are always a way to do this. Now you can brand it as, for example, I'm talking to Bennett Williams, St. Francis High School. He can go back to his high school, run a camp at his high school with maybe his former coach and be able to profit off of it. Obviously they'd do some sort of kickback thing where the school maybe gets a part of it but just that idea of being able to just kind of go to a local place and kind of sell your stuff, even on the point of maybe selling t-shirts, where you go to a high ranked school, let's say it's a school like in Portland, we have Central Catholic and Jesuit, the two big Catholic schools, or maybe you have some of the bigger public schools. Or maybe you go to their, little swag store, their little, where they have, their concession stands or whatever. And maybe they're selling different gear from the guys who are D1 from their former school. Maybe you could buy a shirt of one guy who that family or something. I think there's a lot of flexibility there. I think a lot of people look immediately to the big names and think, oh, these kids are going to get major deals, shoe deals or this, that, or the other. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I do think, though, it's going to be interesting to see how the trickle-down effect happens, because one of the things that Bennett Williams said right away was he's noticed there's a bunch of guys who are starting to kind of spread the wealth a little bit. Say, okay, I might get this deal, but I'm going to spread it out to my teammates or set up some sort of a fund that helps the teammates, because even at the highest level, these college teams, programs that are just flooded with cash, there's still kids on that team who do not eat in the offseason regularly, because they don't have access to it. I mean, that's a crazy thing to think about today in 2021, so much cash in this department, and yet there are still kids that are struggling. In the old days, you couldn't even buy them a piece of pizza without being an NCAA violation. Well, now you can have a situation where they could work for a pizza company and they can get pizza every single week. And I think food is the first thing these kids are going to look for. How can I get the free sandwiches? How can I get the free teriyaki chicken bowl? Just by having my name and likeness in the window or something. So.
And I think with like you said, with the local areas, I think I could see the big time high schools like the Mater Days, the IMGs. For my area, Lakeland, maybe selling jersey of alumni at games and stuff. And that could be huge for not just colleges, but high schools as well. High schools could start bringing in a lot more funding for their athletic programs and their schools in general. And maybe
it just bridges the gap, makes the connection, right? Makes the connection between high school all the way to the pros even.
No, but the thing with that is I don't know how does that when it comes to high school football, when there's good teams, there's really not a lot of parity. And I think that's just going to widen the gap for high school. College, I think it actually shrinks the gap. But high school is just going to absolutely, like a modern day, it's just going to be that much better than they were. Lakeland's just going to be that much better than they were.
Well, and I would say that with social media and with the power of the internet, they already have. I mean, the rich have gotten richer in all of those fields, I would say, on the high school level. You know, I actually tend to think that this name, image, likeness, when it first came out, I thought this was going to be a smash for schools like Oregon. I see D-Rock, he's Irish, you know, Notre Dame. Schools that have a name brand to it that kind of dominate their region, and anybody else in that region is going to really not going to be able to have the same ability to compete. I mean, I look at it from our perspective, Oregon State. If you're talking about the name, image, likeness opportunities at Oregon versus Oregon State, one would think that they are insurmountably better at Oregon, right? But I think you still might have some options. Doesn't mean you still can't have a local radio spot or a local, some sort of advertising. I immediately think of advertising. You know, they used to say back in the 70s, the guys would work for the car dealership and they drive the brand new car, but they'd never work for the car dealership. You know, they get the car as the bonus, as the way the boosters would kind of, you know, grease the wheels. Well, now the kid could actually just promote the brand and drive the new car.
Yeah, I seen. Do you remember the Twitter outrage when Justin Flo was driving that green Mercedes?
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah. Well, so there again is a perfect example. If it works for that local car dealership to promote their brand using that kid, then why can't it work for that kid?
Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense to me?
On top of that, outside of just the local stuff, there's also going to be a lot of kids who might go to a school because of the potential of that top NIL thing. Like Kayvon got that deal. Not a lot of guys are going to get that kind of deal with the non-fungible token and that crypto market thing that he got. Not a lot of guys are going to get that, but the potential of that being there, the option of that's something that could potentially be had is not something you're going to get at every single school. And I think there were a few commitments who talked about Oregon and their NIL and NIL being such a big push. A lot of people in recruiting insiders have been saying that's been a huge push from Mario Cristobal and staff, talking about how they plan to take advantage of name, image, likeness. We don't know. Obviously, we don't know how they plan to do so. But from everything I've seen, they've talked about it a lot, and they have really high hopes for it.
Well, I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially in the memorabilia era as well. Guys signing jerseys. You talked about the helmet signed by Marcus Mariota. Guys spend a lot of their time doing those signings, and those could really impact, people going forward. Have the opportunity to be able to sell gear and everything else with your name on it and attach that all, I think is all positive stuff. But I really like the idea of just kind of promoting the brand from the idea of whether it's be in through the schools or through the community, building camps and those sort of stuff like that to really just kind of open up the door for a lot of people to be involved with it. I also do think, though, that there's, like you said, the potential, it's going to get crazy. There's going to be a certain level. I mean, I've already seen people say this could be the death of college football. You were talking about, Mark, the story. I don't know the full story. I was down at the beach. The kid, it was maybe like a $10,000 for an interview or something. And they were talking about how once they got this deal, then they signed with the school or some sort of a thing. This could be, pay for play sort of situation. But, again, I tend to think that it's already happening a little bit. We're already trending in that direction. And if it works for both parties, then I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Exactly. Think about the rate of pay for this, if this is what you're alluding to, and I didn't look at all the details on this, but this just came out today. Texas A&M, one of the fan websites, Texas A&M is paying the two players that are going to SEC media days, paying them for exclusive interviews. So these players are already going to be available to the media for the standard interviews, but they're paying for kind of an inside look, behind the scenes look, $10,000 per player. They're going to show up at media days for one day. I don't know if the deals involve anything beyond that, so I shouldn't say that the work only involves the one day, but I've looked through the story and that appears to be the case. They outbid me. I offered $18,000 per player, and but they were we're not quite at that level to be paying the those rates.
You just got trademarked this year, Mark. So I mean, you got to build on that. I mean, next year might be there. No, I do think that there's going to be something along those lines. You know, even on the idea of having these kids have the Twitter accounts, have the numbers, have a YouTube channel. Micah Pittman, for example, for the Ducks, has a very successful YouTube channel. There could be, you know, the future of the kids who have the big YouTube channel, have a big social media following. They've gotten huge during high school recruiting or whatever else the case may be. And there might be colleges willing or wanting to partner with that kid just on the level of the social media influence, which is just insane to think about at this point in time. But if the kid can play and it comes with the social media following, then it might work for both parties. But I do think it's wild to have some sort of that insight. Now, it would be unique to see it from a perspective of if those kids actually then work for that conglomerate or work for that group, so that throughout the year they're giving different insight or they're working on, you know, and again, I think you could have easily a podcast or something built to where it's sponsored by a local community credit union or sponsored by something else or whatever, have different sort of advertising connected to it. And people want access. People want inside information. Anytime the kids have the cameras on and they show the facilities or they're behind the scenes, or people just gobble that stuff up. So that stuff's very valuable. Now, I don't think coaches are going to want to sign off on that and have a lot of people have insider information. But at the same time, expanding the brand, I think there's a lot of colleges that are now hip to that. I think there were a lot of colleges that felt like they didn't need that for years. I think there's some colleges now who are going to try to use that for their advantage. Why wouldn't you?
And have you seen the video of touring Oregon's facilities? There's only one like actual full in-depth tour on YouTube, and it's got like 5 million views. Tyrell Crosby took this YouTuber through the facilities, and it got an absurd amount of views. It's something big, and most YouTube channels probably getting maybe $10 CPM. So that's an insane amount of money on 3.5 million views. And then on top of that, I wonder what your guys' opinion is on this. Do you think colleges, instead of just selling blank number 6 jerseys, are going to sell like a DeAnthony Thomas jersey? Say he was still in school. We were back then. And he's a huge name.
Yes.
Are they going to start selling a DeAnthony Thomas jersey, or is it just going to be a number 6 Oregon jersey?
Well, think about Tim Tebow.
Your timing's perfect, Mike.
Right.
This came out today at Michigan. Michigan players. Here we go. It's on ESPN's. So they are going to, just read the title, Michigan Athletics officials retail store partners with players to sell jerseys with names on back.
Of course. I mean, I think that's the first place you start. I think that's where a lot of us saw the biggest example of the hypocrisy before, right?
Yes.
Where you could walk into the bookstore and you could see it's obviously the number 12 that's the number 12 on the field, or the number 5, or whatever the case may be, whatever the player is. And then as soon as they go pro, then the next year they can have the name on the back. Okay. So we were selling Mariota number 8 with no Mariota on the back. The moment he goes to the Titans, now they can put Mariota on the back, right? Or the same thing with Tebow, right? But think of how many number 15 jerseys there would have been out there that he could have been able to make money off of. And again, maybe a guy like Tim Tebow, because he knows where he's at or whatever, is not really in it for the money. He would set it up as some charity for some church or something. But the case may be is that he would make a lot of money.
Oh, my word. He would have made a ton of money. Johnny Manziel, when you bring that up and phrase it that way, he was the first guy that actually got me thinking about it, because he, of course, got in trouble during the offseason because he supposedly signed autographs, and he probably did. And it was this hypocritical decision by the NCAA in which they publicly said that they couldn't find enough evidence and he was innocent, but they still suspended him for the first half of the first game, which made no sense. And you know, then he did one of these. That was the first time he started showing the money after scoring a touchdown. And it was like, okay, this is where it hit me that these guys really need to profit off. This is the United States of America, and everybody can make a buck except for these guys.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the amount of money Manziel would have made would have been absolutely absurd.
100%.
I still think to this day he was the biggest name. While in college, he was the biggest name in college football ever. Like, while he was still in college, he was huge. Everybody knew who he was.
It only lasts a year. It only lasts maybe 2 years at the most, right? For some of these guys. So you have to capitalize on it now. I mean, think about Cam Newton, that 1 year. How many number 2 jerseys would have been sold? Holy. Oh, man. I mean, any of these
His
big
girlfriend's
names.
jersey.
Yeah, even the girlfriend's jersey would have sold. Huge. In the ladies, would have been invisible. But the point is that the name, image, likeness, I think there's so many different layers to it. I think the first layer is just getting rid of the whole stigma of not being able to help a student athlete out, right? I think that's the first step. I think being able to be a company and willing to partner with that, even to sell autographs, just the very first basic thing, I think would be beneficial. And it also, I think, is really important that it gets to be transparent, possibly even be able to track, where the money's coming from, where the money's going, taxes. I think Uncle Sam, obviously, Mark wants to get his piece of that. And I think that's going to be another layer to it. People trying to get around the system there. So I think it's a work in progress, but I think it's many real positives. And I do think the rich are going to get richer from it and the poor are going to get poorer from it in college football.
I do hope if any college football players getting NIL deals are watching this, an agent isn't a lawyer. If you're signing a contract, please have a lawyer look over it. You don't need any law experience or contract experience to be an agent.
That's a great point. I do think the agents are coming out of the woodworks too on this thing, because everybody is hyping these kids from day one. All these kids, not all of them, but realistically, a lot of these kids think they're going to the next level, and they're not. Mm-hmm. So there's a huge percentage of these kids that are in their mind, they're working every single day, they're grinding every single day to get to that next level because they're going to get that bag. It's probably not going to happen. So you got to hit it now. If you're going to take advantage of this opportunity now, take advantage of it now.
It's going to be huge for some dudes. Like, for instance, there's this guy who played at Armwood, not too far from Tampa, Florida, where I'm at. He was really good his first few years as a starter, amassed like 80,000 followers on Twitter, 100 and some thousand on Instagram. But he ended up going to a group of 5 conference or an FCS school. So what do you guys think is going to have the effect like for those guys with massive followings, maybe not going to the biggest brand schools?
We still got to be able to play. I mean, you can have the biggest following you want, but you still got to be able to play. And then not only that, but also transfer portal. Now with transfer portal, you spend 1 year and you still keep getting connects with the guys who recruited you before, and maybe that something else opens up, be able to transfer. I think the transfer portal, loosening the transfer portal, is a much bigger story across the board than anything else we've had in the last couple of years, because this is going to, I think, majorly change college football, especially because I don't think teams that are below 500 are going to be able to hold on to any of their decent players. I think that you're going to see right out of the gate, loyalty is not alive and well with 18-year-old, 19-year-old kids. They're going to go to where they can get playing time. They're going to go to where they can win. They can go to where they can advance. And I think you'll see a bunch of kids who might get sold on a product at 18 or 16, 17 in recruiting, get to the school by freshman year and say, this is not for me. I'm out. I'm going to go to a better school. I'm going to go to this, that, and the other. I do think you're going to see that.
Yeah, those are all good points. I don't know if it's that. I think every situation's a little bit different, and it's a little bit more complex than that, because my first conclusion to the whole transfer portal situation, and then as NIL feeds into that, would be you got to play to make money. You got to be a player. You can't say I'm the third string quarterback at Penn State and pay me. Now, in that particular town, there are fanatics, and there are these college towns are so fanatical about their particular teams. Yes, the backup guard at Ole Miss could make a few bucks in Oxford, but to make decent money, why sit at Ohio State as the third string quarterback when you're a 4-star, when you can go to Kansas State and be the starter?
Hey, that's a great point.
So I would think from that standpoint, it would spread the wealth. Here is one concern that I've got of many, even though I'm pro NIL because we live in America and they should be given that opportunity. There are some pitfalls. One that bothers me, and I don't know how this could possibly be regulated against, or if anyone cares to regulate against it. There's nothing wrong with a student athlete adding the NIL opportunities now into the equation of, okay, what school do I want to choose in addition to the academics, and do they win in the relationships? And they add the NIL factor. Okay, I'd rather go to Oregon than Oregon State because I've got more opportunities from a revenue standpoint. But for the possibility that companies come to high school athletes and say, we are going to give you this deal if you choose Oregon or said school instead of that school or any other school. That's
probably already been happening though.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, but
I don't think that's right.
No, I would agree with that, but I think that's just another level of influence. Mom's involved with this, grandma's involved with this, anybody else in the family, and now you're having somebody else who's working for a corporation that thinks that that's going to benefit them being involved with that. You're right, Mark. That's a really slippery slope.
You know who else would like to benefit from NIL?
Amen.
So we've got our friends at Tri-State Sketch. Let me get that correct. TriStateSketch.com. And they did that for me. I didn't ask for that. That was just delivered to me. I had no idea it was coming.
That's awesome.
These fine people at TriStateSketch.com, they're available. And we will get the it up on the banner here so you know exactly where to go. And what you do is you send them a photo. And I've seen about 8 or 10 examples of their work, and they do really good work. It's tremendous. And I was kind of blown away by it. And you send them a photo, and you send whatever type of wood that you want it placed on, or whatever type
of wood.
That in particular is on wood. I guess it's coming my way.
I love
at some point here soon. Yeah. So there we go. TriStateSketch.com, and let them know that Mark sent you.
That's great. Yeah, no, I think the world is opening up for a lot of that. I mean, just even thinking about the Kayvon Thibodeau deal, part of that is because of the Tinker Hatfield name. So you have this names, you have other people who are going to jump on this thing as well. Artists are no different. People are taking pictures or this, that, or the other. I think everybody's going to get a piece of the pie on this one.
Musicians could get involved in some way too.
100%. Highlight reels, all this sort of stuff. I mean, with the whole blockchain idea and the whole idea of linking things into secure formats or something. I think there's a lot of options.
I love Kayvon, love Nike. I'm not mad at it, but there's definitely a lot of things people could be mad at involving the NFT he got. I don't know if you guys understand NFTs. So it's kind of like crypto in a sense, but it's a picture, and you can pay whatever you want to pay for it. So say that NFT was set up by Tinker Hatfield for Kayvon. What stops a Pat Kilkenny from going paying $300,000 for that NFT, even if it's not worth it?
There you go.
I mean, I'm not mad at it, but
no, but I do think
definitely an argument to be made.
Yes, I think that's another major gray area on the thing is what's the value of it? Like we were talking about with those interviews, Mark. What's the going rate? $10,000 for an interview is now the rate. Okay, that's blowing things out of the water.
NFTs are really hard to trace too. Those are like nearly impossible to trace without knowing the actual source of it.
Dude, Kevin Shaw
get a free chainsaw.
Brought to you by Still.
Hey,
I'm telling you what, every year, and I used to watch in the summertime, ESPN used to watch, they used to play the chainsaw lumberjack. Remember those things back in the day? And it was the like lumberjack always Oregon State representatives on that. There was always a couple of dudes from Oregon State. Hey, we don't eat without Oregon State. We got to support our farmers, man. We got to tip the cap to them. But that is hilarious. Kevin, dude, you killed me on that. Get a free chainsaw.
You don't have good teams without bad teams.
Well, I do think also, there's a friendly rivalry when it comes to any of these socioeconomic levels of where you guys are at in the state. Oregon represents a different part of the group state than Oregon State does. And I think there's so many different social elements to get into the reason why those rivalries work so well. So that is hilarious.
So I wonder, in regards to Oregon State, how do y'all feel about Jonathan Smith? I feel like he's one of the most underrated coaches in the country. Given what he inherited at Oregon State, that roster was an absolute mess.
Yep.
And if you go and look at the players on their roster, he's gotten all of the most talented players to ever come to Oregon State, whether it's transfers or commits, are under Jonathan Smith.
Yeah, no, I like Jonathan Smith. I'm not a Beav hater. I like to laugh. I
don't think they're a rival.
I mean, old school. I get it.
Yeah, in my lifetime, there's no reason.
Yeah, but I do think Bebo's. Hey, they got the bragging rights this year. Beat the Ducks this year, so I do think they're building something. I like Jonathan Smith when he was with Coach Pete. And I thought that was a really tough team to stop. I thought he is really, really smart when it comes to both sides of the ball. I think there's a lot of times where guys might be more offensive or less defensive, like we saw with Chip. or maybe more defensive than we saw with offensive. But I tend to think Jonathan Smith has a really good viewpoint of both sides of the ball, and they're in games. They're not getting blown out anymore. They're going to be in games for a while. And, I kept telling Doug fans, it's going to happen at some point. Get ready for it. We beat them for almost 10 years straight. It's going to happen at some point.
They get Nike money too.
They do. And Phil gives money to them. Penny's a Beeve, his wife. So, all the Beeves who kind of complain about the Oregon only gets the money. My joke was the other day, Phil gave another $500 million to Oregon. And my joke was, well, he did the same thing to Stanford. Stanford didn't talk about it.
Yeah. They didn't, and it's marketing. That's what everything is nowadays. It's all how you market it and how you push it to the public, how you push it to these recruits. Like, if they don't know about this benefit that you guys have, who's going to tell them about it if it's not you?
Well, it's funny you said that in your lifetime. How old are you, Mike?
22.
Okay, so in the last 20 years, Oregon has put more of a focus on college sports in general to up the revenue and to up the increase of their student population. So they never saw the correlation really before. They never saw the correlation until the 90s. It didn't really click until basically the 90s that, maybe if we were successful in sports, we would actually bring in more student population or more buzz for a university. They didn't have any of those clues.
I had a bunch of kids who I went to high school with here in Winter Haven, Florida, who I think 4 of them ended up going to either Oregon or Oregon State. Oregon State, we had Artavius Pierce go there out of here. He was a really good running back for them. And then otherwise, there was a lot of people who went there just because as they grew up, they loved watching DeAnthony Thomas. They loved watching Dennis Dixon, Marcus Mariota. And they're like, okay, that sounds like a fun school. Let's go over there.
Yeah, well, it's also the nationalization of college football. Colin Cowherd, he's from out here, and Colin and I used to chat almost every single day at lunch. I worked at a grocery store, and he was right down the road. He would come in for lunch. We'd chat it up, and that was his big thing right then. He said, "We're at the point right now where college football is becoming less regional, and so it's becoming more national. As it becomes more regional, now we in the West Coast care about what happens in the South. West Coast never really cared about what happened with the Alabama game. Now they're checking it every single week. So it goes both ways. The West Coast is now concerned more with what's happening in the South, and the South is now actually aware that there's football on the West Coast outside of USC.
Don't know if they care about it, but
they're aware. They're aware.
They know it exists. So do you guys question, Mark, do you think Jonathan Smith stays at Oregon State, or do you think he takes a big boy job somewhere?
Well, I think there's typically a difference with most individuals when there are those roots that have been, planted for a long, long time. So it's not just a really young up and coming coach that found a decent job and he started something like a Matt Campbell at Iowa State.
He's not leaving.
That's the alma mater. That is, and as I understand it, he's really driven roots as an adult there as well, in terms of obviously home and family and everything. So, it's difficult to conjecture what's important to him past, of course, family and winning and money. Those factor in for most of us, but beyond that, I really don't know.
I hope he gets another job. I don't want to play against them.
No, he's going to be a thorn in Oregon side for a while. If they're 500 or better, they're never going to ask him to go, and he's going to live through multiple athletic directors. So it's not like an athletic director is going to really have the power over him to pull the trigger.
Athletic directors get fired all the time.
Oh, absolutely. And so my point is I think he'll have the job as long as he wants it. I think he would have to really, really win to have a better job come offer. I think he sees that as prime job, Pac-12, where he wants to be. He's not a Hollywood.
He wants to be out west for sure.
He's not a Hollywood type of guy. He's not looking for the next big thing, but he would have to really, really win. I mean, I'm talking like win the conference and go to the Rose Bowl or do a couple years in a row where you're doing that. To have anybody else really big name, I think, come to call to get him, because I just don't think he moves the needle for schools.
So you guys can help me out here. What this is are my predictions for the upcoming season.
Nice.
Now, I have yet to release these, and they can be changed. I came up with these last night. So it's typically my approach to do a big season kickoff show, maybe the night before the season, and unveil all my predictions. Well, as doing what I'm doing, you don't get a lot of views that way because the shelf life's one day, and then nobody cares about your predictions. So you got to release them early. So I'm getting on this early. Okay. Can you guys help me handicap I've got my thoughts on the division. Maybe you guys will say something that will maybe cause me to rethink things.
The South or North?
Either one, but let's start in the North.
So, Ryan, if you want to start.
Well, I was going to ask you what your thoughts are. I haven't really broke it down. I haven't looked at everybody's schedule. I haven't done that much research on it. Just going off of what we had from last year, you got to think, who are the top 2 teams in each division, right? So I would assume it's Oregon and Washington in the North, and I would assume it's USC and ASU in the South. Are you on that same level? No. What do you think, Mike?
So, first of all, I have ASU 4th in the South. But when it comes to the North, I really think that it's volatile. It's really volatile as everyone's ceilings and floors. There's a wide gap between it. Now, the teams who could win the conference are from the North are obviously going to be Oregon and Washington. But one of those teams could end up falling behind a Cal, in my opinion, with Chase Garbers coming back, loads of experience. Yes, they lost Tim DeRuyter, but they also took our linebackers coach, who many wanted to be our defensive coordinator. So it's not like they lost everything that they could have there. They have a veteran team. They always have a fairly good defense. Obviously, they lost their defensive coordinator, but still, they have a veteran defense. They have a good defense. I think Cal could actually, in a crazy scenario, Cal could win the North.
I wouldn't be mad at that. I think they're probably the 3rd best team. I agree. Solid team, good team coming back. Had a lot of real weird things happen to them last year with COVID. You didn't really get a chance to really exactly see what that team was doing. But I kind of think that same thing with ASU, where I feel like ASU didn't really get a chance to have the year that they wanted to. They're returning guys as well. And I think this with all the stuff with the heat that they got with Herm over the last year and everything else with that, I think they could be coming in firing. Now, I don't spend that much time focusing on the South because I do think the North is better. I think that out of the North, the only school I really don't have that much confidence in is Washington State. I think Stanford's going to be better. I think Cal's going to be better. I think Oregon and Washington are going to be better. And Oregon State.
I actually think the South is better this year than the North.
I like that.
Like, not that close either.
Really?
Not that close.
No, because the South could very well put, like, say every team hits their, they could very well have 4 teams that are some of the best in the conference. UCLA, USC, Arizona State, and Utah. There's people who have each of them winning the conference, and they all could very well compete for the South crown. Right. When you look at the North, it's pretty much Oregon, Washington. You could think Cal's going to be good. Are they going to win the North? Probably not. Oregon State, they're not winning the North. Stanford, they're not winning the North. And it's just like, it's much more wide open in the South. And obviously we don't know exactly what's going on with a lot of those teams because we haven't seen it completely. Like, we need to see Jaden Daniels another year. We need to see these teams go against each other after being able to mesh outside of COVID, because whatever we got from COVID, a lot of it may not fit exactly what we're going to see this year, even if they are some of the same players. The schemes were different.
Right. And I think the team that really showcased its skills the most and surprised everybody was Colorado. You talked about Utah winning it, but I think Colorado might be even better than Colorado or than ASU or UCLA. Every year I don't know what to get from USC. I think USC is one of those teams that every year people want to be good, and I don't know if they're as good as people think they are. Now, I do think that Clay Helton has hung on long enough to where maybe he's out of the hot seat development, and it might be more comfortable going into this year, feeling a little more confident. But I think
Williams.
I think, yeah, and they also very strong recruiting, have picked their recruiting back up a little bit. They're always stacked. But I think UCLA was an interesting team last year. And I think they graduated a lot of their guys off the line, though. I don't know exactly how they're going to be coming back with their recruit. And again, you said with COVID last year, you don't really know what you got. I felt like the UCLA team that Oregon saw was one of the best teams in the whole league all year.
I think they win the South this year.
Okay.
I have them first in the South. I think I had USC second, Utah third, ASU fourth, Colorado fifth, and then Arizona.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can all agree Arizona is going to suffer.
Arizona's terrible.
Yes. They're terrible. And I went into any kind of research I'm doing thinking the conventional wisdom, obviously, it's a 2-team race in the North, and then thinking it's Arizona State, USC, and Utah. And I thought I was maybe a little ahead of the curve way back mid last season, thinking Arizona State's going to be my team in 2020 21. Now, with all the controversy going on, don't know how that's going to affect the current team. I do like Charlie Brewer coming in from Baylor to be the quarterback for Utah, and I think those three teams are razor tight.
I never understood Arizona State's hype. The only thing that they've done to garner that is beat Oregon.
Yeah, well, they played pretty well though. I mean, last year the close game to start the year off. You know, they had they basically they played two games.
They had a 2-touchdown lead against USC with about 3 minutes left.
Yeah, I don't know. I was very skeptical of the Herm hire and I really like Herm Edwards, but I thought that was kind of a skeptical move. I didn't know if that would translate as well, and I was pretty surprised at how well they played. I felt like they had a pretty young team. I don't follow the South, like I said, that closely, but I just pulled up USC's schedule. They're playing at ASU first week of November. That's going to be a hell of a game. That could be a major game. And so it's going to be interesting. I think USC, you know, call it what you want, but, you know, I think they always think of themselves at such a higher level than everybody else that they're like surprised when they lose. And yeah, I think they could go into this schedule, you know, they always face Stanford early. Stanford always gives them a tough test. They see them in week 2, but they could go through their schedule undefeated. They play at Colorado. It's a tough game. They play Utah at home. They play at Notre Dame. They could be undefeated going into that Notre Dame game.
For sure.
I mean, that'd be a hell of a play for them. You know, go back to Notre Dame, national televised game. Notre Dame probably is in a pretty good position as well with their win-loss record at that point. That could be a game that could really push USC over the edge nationally. If they were able to beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame and be undefeated, and then they go play Arizona, and then they have that ASU game, that's the game they lose.
That would push the Pac-12 up as well. You have more than one team.
For sure, but I'm just saying, if they went undefeated that whole time, they would lose to ASU. That's just I mean, I would put money on it right now almost, right?
No, with the how good USC, I think, is going to be really good. I think they could start undefeated and lose to an Arizona State. But I also think there's a lot of other good teams. Like, for instance, I have Oregon with 2 losses, one being to Ohio State, the other UCLA.
Down there.
Yeah, there's a lot of good teams in the South. Like, and it's obviously the northern teams are seen as better than all the teams in the South, but how many teams there are in the South that could compete for the conference is just why I think the South might be better this year.
Well, that's what Mark said. He said those 4 teams are razor thin.
Mm-hmm.
I think the 3 are razor thin. I need to see a little bit more from UCLA. I thought that they took a substantial jump forward last year. Throw out the 3-4 record. They just played so much better. Yeah, that know they should have beat USC. They had a 2-score lead in the fourth quarter. They lost a lot of they had a 2-score lead against Stanford with 3 or 4 minutes left and blew that game in overtime.
If DTR
if they had their quarterback against Oregon, they probably could win that game too. That was a close game.
If DTR had ever hit his potential, UCLA would have been insanely dangerous. Because it's every game that I've watched that they've lost close, it's like late in the game, DTR's played great the entire game. Late in the game, he misses a few easy open passes, and the other team takes advantage. At least that's what it seemed like from my perspective of it.
Yeah. Well, USC also very interesting how they ran their schedule last year comparatively to UCLA. I think UCLA is in a unique spot. I think their offense is going to be every year improving, right? You would assume that with Chip, right? Obviously, he had a little negative spot with the NFL because they caught up with him, but I think he's a pretty good offensive college coach. Defensively is where I have the questions. Last year, they had some studs on the defense that Chip inherited. So their defensive line, it felt like, and their defensive linebackers had matured naturally, not necessarily a part of the coaching staff, even though they do have pretty good defensive coaches down there as well. My question is always on the defensive side of the ball for UCLA. I think for any Chip Kelly run team. So,
I mean, a lot of the Chip Kelly run teams had solid defenses, though. Because
but his focus is 100% offense. Right.
I think they beat LSU.
Ooh, that would be unreal. That would be I'm as West Coast as it gets. I want to believe we can beat them, but I got to see it on the field first, man. Every time we schedule those dang SEC schools, it's like, here we go. This is our year. This is our year.
That's more me being low on LSU. I'm just more low on LSU than insanely high on UCLA. I'm high on UCLA compared to most. I just am very low on LSU.
I don't think that those teams are comparable from a talent perspective, but I think LSU will play down to UCLA, and I think it'll be a very competitive game. But I will be somewhat surprised if UCLA pulls that one out.
Yeah,
somewhat surprised.
I would be surprised as well. I would be very surprised. Be interesting to see how they play Fresno. You know, we both have that shared opponent in the preseason. That'd be an interesting one. I have a tough time seeing UCLA doing crazy things. Just I was surprised by them last year, but you know, again, anything happens. That's why we love college football, man.
I think Colorado's the biggest sleeper for the whole
Colorado. I feel like I'm on board with them now after I've seen what I saw last year. I feel like they were the sleeper last year. This year, I feel like there's some expectations with that, but I didn't know what to expect with them last year. Brand new coach, everything else.
I tend to believe that was an aberration, and they're going to plummet back to just above Arizona. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking. Colorado, they're going to take their rightful place.
Can Oregon State make a bowl?
Sure, they could. I don't believe I have them making a bowl. No, I don't. But
Colorado. Go back to Colorado for just 1 second. They play Texas A&M and Minnesota in their preseason, so that could be another one. That could be an interesting one to watch. See how they play against those schools. If they give Texas A&M a game, and then they go in and lose against Minnesota, well, then you know what you got. But if they play well in both those games, that could be really interesting. Again, I'm hopeful for the Pac-12 in general. I just want the Pac-12 to show up. I want the stigma to start to dissolve a little bit. I want there to start to get a little bit more hype around the fact that there is actual football west of the Mississippi.
So, Ryan, you've touched upon some of these big non-conference games, and of course we were robbed of those non-conference games last year. No big non-conference games across the nation. LSU, UCLA, Oregon, Ohio State's the headliner. I don't think there's any question. If the Pac-12 wants for people to, it's going to be overblown, but still, in terms of perception, the Pac-12 decline has been overblown. Not that it hasn't been real, but it's been overblown. So what's going to catapult it in the other direction would be Oregon going to Columbus and winning that game. That happens. Wow.
That same day, Washington goes to Michigan.
Yes.
So, I mean, we're
Michigan
talking
kind of sucks.
And that's a nice matchup, and I love that matchup between the Big Ten and the Pac, but that's not going to resonate.
I agree, but I'm just saying, Pac-12's got to get some W's out here. If Oregon goes and loses to Ohio State and gets blown out, it's not going to do anybody any favors. If they go and they play a competitive football, maybe at the end there's something that happens. Oregon State or Ohio State wins. I think there might be a little bit of, hey, attaboy. But Washington, they got to go win that game. I mean, that's the thing I have is that we can have a schedule. We can have a schedule where you could have 10 different one of these matchups where the Pac-12 is playing out of conference and they could lose 9 of them. See, this is the bigger issue for me is that, yes, I agree that it is overblown because I do think the whole national media and the conferences themselves are constantly looking to try to get one conference out of the playoff in week 1. If they can get conference out of there in week 1, they only have to worry about those 4 conferences going forward. They know they have a place at the table. They want the Pac-12 out. Years before that, maybe it was the Big 12, maybe it's the Big 10 at some point in time. It's never been the SEC or the ACC, right? But maybe this is a year that Pac-12 could show up. First couple weeks are going to be huge this year.
So, Ryan, you're okay if out of all the games we just mentioned, and there's a few others, Cal goes to TCU. That's a nice little matchup. And there's a few others. Stanford plays Kansas State in addition to Stanford, or in addition to Notre Dame. I think there's a BYU, of course, has their typical games in there. Yeah, Stanford plays Vanderbilt, although that's,
Stanford loses to Kansas State. They need to fire David Shaw, and I love David Shaw.
Well, first game of the year, anything can happen, bud. First game of the year is wild.
Not awful. So
their coach is good, but he deserves better.
You'd like to see at least a split, something in that range, Ryan. You'd like to see the Pac-12 win half those games roughly.
I feel like you have to. I think for the national media, I think you got to win more. I think every game outside of the Oregon or Ohio State game, the Pac-12 should be rocking it. I don't think there's a question Stanford should be able to get out and play well against Kansas State. Opening game in their building, I don't think that's a problem at all. I think even the Cal TCU game.
That game's in Dallas. They're in Jerry's World, the Stanford Kansas State game.
Oh, the K-State. Okay, my bad. But even there, it's still. I think Stanford, quality program. I like David Shaw. I think David Shaw is one of those guys who, Stanford, we kind of look at through the lens of they have everything out here because they are just so loaded with cash and everything else. But they do have a little bit of an uphill climb for the kids that they're trying to get. They're trying to get 4-point students out of every single high school they go into.
So is Notre Dame.
True. But they're competing over the same student, and so, but they can go to any school in the country. I think that's a unique thing for Stanford that many other colleges can't do. But Stanford is a school that I feel like this year could be right in the running. They're very quiet. They don't go about it with the social media posts like Oregon does, but I think they could come in this year firing. And I think if they go out that first game and beat Kansas State, they always give USC trouble that second game of the second week. They beat USC first. Then they go to at Vanderbilt, go 3-0 to start the year with 3 quality opponents. That could be a huge step forward too. Now, obviously, Stanford beating USC probably doesn't help USC in the future, but I like it from the North perspective. So it makes Stanford just stronger. So, which is something I like.
As a Pac-12 fan, I'd rather USC be good than Stanford be good. Because the USC-Oregon matchup is it's the only way that the Pac-12 is going to draw number 1 type ratings.
I agree. But personally, I always like to see Stanford give them a tough one. But, you're right. I think the way it matches up this year is that you have to have it again, like we said last year, where they meet in that conference championship. If they both have a very strong year, they're both, let's say, in the top 10, at the end of the year, that would be the premier matchup for sure.
Kind of like 2019 with Utah, but replace Utah with USC, and it would be a little more respected.
Yes. Even though I do think Utah is a prime program, very similar to Stanford. Every single year you can count on them.
But national view matters, and I don't think a lot of people nationally who weren't diehard football fans really respected Utah no matter what they were ranked.
No.
Sure. What team's going to factor into the Pac-12 narrative is the team that almost plays just about more than half of a Pac-12 schedule, and that's BYU.
BYU, man.
Dude,
Arizona, Utah, Arizona State, USC.
They basically had that same schedule last year. Yeah, they had it all taken from them. Had to go play weird. They had to go play a weird schedule last year, so they're ready.
It was a bad schedule.
It really was, but they had to do it because it was dictated.
Yeah, it wasn't their fault. It wasn't their fault. Yeah, they just had to patch it together.
I think BYU is going to be trouble, and I think they're gonna get at least one or two of those teams.
I think they're going to go 2-4 in those games. I think they get Arizona and they get Washington State.
Yeah, I would be either. Again, I think Utah. That's a rivalry. They hate each other. Okay, that fan base and the BYU fan base cannot stand each other. The fact that they get to play that game is tremendous because they have to make that thing happen. I think BYU's in it. I think at Washington State they could win that game. I think that at USC at the end of the year would be an absolutely wild game. In the normal slot where they're playing UCLA, they're playing a BYU, which is interesting. Last game of the year, and then ASU. I think they're probably going to beat Arizona to start the year because we talked about how bad Arizona is. I think they're going to have their hands full with Utah. I would assume Utah is going to beat them, but I think they could be a handful for the Pac-12 schools. And then I think they're probably going to win out the rest of their. It might have some trouble here or there, but outside of the Pac-12 schools, they have a fairly easy schedule. It feels like.
Good stuff here on Oregon football for the past hour and 15 minutes. Ryan Winter, Sports Chat 503. Mike Black, fifthquarter.net, fifth quarter college football on the Oregon channel. So that fifth quarter situation, Mike, you cover all the teams. So fifth quarter's got all the teams, and then you got your individual sites, correct?
No, so it's a broad site that each writer can post to, and then when you go to the site, you can drop down and pick your team. And then it'll load up all the articles for your team or whatever team you're going there to look at. Or there's even general recruiting articles, stuff like that as well. And it's not just college football either. They do have some NFL coverage, and they're looking to get more into that NFL coverage here soon this year. Very good.
And again, I had displayed this earlier. Would like to have you guys check out tristatesketch.com, and you pick your surface, and you can see the craftsmanship there. It's phenomenal. I've seen about 10 or 12 examples, and it's been really nice for them to draw some of these up for me without me even asking. saying, Mark, we love what you do. Look at this. And so thank you so much for that, guys. I appreciate it. All right, Ryan, it's been great to see you. Mike and I were both just blown away by your outfit. You brought some
repping it. And it's summertime out here, man. It's hot.
It's very
hot. You got to represent out here.
Mike, anything you've got available that people need to know about?
Ducks and Dogs podcast. We record it live every time we record an episode. Tomorrow around 6:30 p.m. Central Time, we're going to have Josh Pate of 247 Sports on the show.
Nice. And Sports Chat 503, anything over there now? You guys taking it easy?
No, we always taking it easy out here, Mark. We just, it's the off season. I do interviews with the players, so I'll do maybe like an interview every week or so. Drop some of those and just chat, man. Just chatting. We'll do maybe like the preview stuff going in the beginning of the year and stuff. But yeah, we take it pretty easy. And then once the season starts, we'll just do recaps like we normally do every week and previews, and let's just talk about sports, man.
Awesome. Awesome. Love chopping it up with both of you, Mike and Ryan. Thank you guys so much, and we will get together soon.
Awesome.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you, bud.